Welcome to another episode of NeverEndingPanel.com. I am your host and moderator, Donnie Collin. Tonight's panel will be about, and then I will introduce the panelists. Tonight's panel will be about, has science fiction run out of ideas? Our panelists tonight are Tom Camus, who is the video librarian here at LOSFest, Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society, as well as an editor in his own right. Tom, what have you edited? And I understand you're working on something. Very briefly, just introduce yourself.
Well, I did. I worked actually with Charlie here on the Walt Lee's update to the Encyclopedia of Fantastic Films. However, that's no longer happening. But what's recent is if anyone was at the TCM festival this last weekend, they had a restoration of The Day of the Triffids, a 1963 science fiction film. And I have been and will be working with Mike Haidt, who owns the rights to that film, for a digital restoration and special edition to that film.
Well qualified to talk about whether science fiction has ideas or not.
Can you get it on Netflix?
Oh, let's not talk about that.
And Charles Lee Jackson II, and of course, my Duberhead brother, Eitan Collin. So tonight's panel
As told you by my bonehead brother, Donnie.
Yes. Tonight's panel is, will science fiction run out of ideas? We've all gotten together, talked about it. The answer is yes, and so now we're moving on to our next panel.
Yeah.
No, not really.
No, you're right. Not only did it run out of ideas, it ran out of ideas a long time ago, and we've just been recycling the same ideas over and over and over again.
You really think that there are no new ideas at all?
Absolutely.
Werner Vinge's Rainbow's End, not new?
You have to think that, because when a new idea comes along, if somebody's thought of it already, then it's not a new idea. You can't possibly know what the new idea is going to be, because then it won't be the new idea. Briscoe County was right. If you know what the coming thing is, it's not coming anymore. It's here.
Pretty much. Now, I don't think you have the new ideas. I think what you get in science fiction is the new interpretation of the old idea.
Yeah.
That you have endlessly. That is fascinating.
Well, not
how
just
people
science
reinterpret. One of my favorite episodes of any show ever was South Park. The Simpsons did it. And it was brilliant. This kid was going nuts because he couldn't come up with an evil plan, because the Simpsons had already done every single idea he had, and he insisted his idea be original. And it was Professor Chaos, and he just was going insane till finally somebody explained to him, look, the Simpsons might have done it, but they ripped it off from these people, who ripped it off from those people, who ripped it off from these people. Everybody's done it before. Just try to put a good spin on it, and we'll all be happy.
Well, is the implication then that there was a time that there were new ideas, the golden age, or was that recidivist also, when you'd have a bunch of guys on a panel back then also saying, oh, it's all recidivist, and that was taken from Verne's, or taken from this, or taken from that? The implication seems to be that there was a time that there were original ideas, and now there aren't, and now it's all recidivist. I think from the beginning of time, it's always recidivist.
Yeah, you find.
And I promise to stop saying that word.
Plato faced with a bunch of people saying, "Well, this is all very interesting, but it was done in the Saga of Gilgamesh, and this stuff about
you're ripping off the
Jupiter.
Medians.
You're just ripping off the Greeks. If you go back far enough, you're going to find some guy telling stories, and he may have told all the stories, and just everybody else listened.
Rip off Thog.
So we're like on the sidelines just saying, it's been done, we've seen it, But the truth of the matter is, you have to think in the canon of scientific, of everything that's been written. I find it hard to believe that every single book that's come out since science fiction really was birthed, as a medium, it's all recidivist. We're at loss, for God's sake. Somebody say, oh, well, this was an original idea. I don't have that knowledge. I'm challenging you guys. What was truly incredibly original?
Depends how you look at it. Was Frankenstein truly an original idea, or was it simply the Gollum story repackaged with a lightning rod?
Well, and there isn't even a lightning rod in the book. It's just a big vat of chemicals. So it's like it's the Gollum.
Yeah, that visual has been seared in our head. Pardon the pun from the movie.
Yes, the book Frankenstein, or A Modern Prometheus, is clearly fantasy pretending to be science. The movies tend to be science fiction because they actually invented the idea of sewing the body together from parts of old dead bodies and electrifying it.
Was the golem self-aware and articulate and intelligent?
Depends which version.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I'm saying in the way that Frankenstein's monster was beautifully articulate.
Not in the legend. It's just a big clay statue that can just about distinguish between who's supposed to be killed and who's not supposed to be killed.
Understood.
It doesn't always get that
and doesn't
right.
always get that right. Yeah.
So maybe the original
In other
idea
words,
in
he's a
there
government
was
worker.
how articulate this monster was, but the notion of bringing something to life from nothing had been borrowed. So then it doesn't. You might say that that's the original idea. you know, by the criteria we're setting, nothing could ever possibly be original. Yet Frankenstein remains as a classic because it appealed somehow to a large enough audience over generations. And I would argue that maybe that's enough of original idea without, you know, without saying nothing is original.
No,
Yes.
I would say I, Robot, Isaac Asimov, could qualify in a lot of ways as original. He was the first one. I mean, he wasn't the first one to deal with robots. Obviously, that play from Czechoslovakia was the first one with the concept of robots. But that play also, basically having mechanical slaves versus human slaves, realizing where the industrial age was going. I think that was an original idea, and Asimov's take on that, especially the 3 laws of robotics, I think that was truly an original concept that he then ran with. It's one of the reasons why he is Asimov. By the way, why we have 3 greats in science fiction, and he's one of them. So it's not impossible. I'm just saying it's damn hard, especially once you get your culture and your science and the technology that comes from it established.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the book that we wrote, but it's essentially Rip Van Winkle meets Ayn Rand.
What's the name of that book? The Unincorporated Man. Yes, Tim.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say,
Everyone look at Soundman Tim.
who could say that there's not original stuff? I mean, you know, has nobody been reading Cory Doctorow? You know, he's
Right.
written books about, you know,
Hackers taking over the world.
people being able to print, you know, items and making amusement parks out of nothing, you know, or Neil Stephenson, you know, who wrote about, you know, the power of an artificially intelligent book which educates people. You know, these are original ideas, I'm pretty sure.
Well, what was that story?
Thank you, Soundman Tim. That's what I was waiting for. I'm much relieved. Yeah.
Wasn't there a short story in the early 1980s called The Everything Machine about essentially a nanotechnology box and how that it's going to transform and affect everything?
Stop doing that, man. I like what he said.
Oh, sorry.
Well, but that's just taking that's taking a genie and turning it into a technological thing. So the originality comes in the treatment, in the fine points. You can take an iconic idea from fantasy, make it a science fiction idea instead of a genie coming out of a bottle. You have a machine
Like a golem.
that you have a machine that does stuff. In RUR, the slaves, the robots, were what we would now call androids. Sometime after that, somebody invented robots in the way we think of them, mechanical men, and I don't know who that is. The earliest one I know of is the Robotrix in Metropolis, but there may be one before that in some forgotten film. Certainly it's original to make it metal instead of flesh. So it's the degree of how much, how original does it have to be original?
Tom, this is a tough crowd. It looked like you wanted to say something, so I'm going to break
Oh,
open this
well,
space.
now that we have 2 minutes left.
So wait, Tom, what do you think?
Well,
No, I'm just
will science fiction run out of new ideas? I think that just as ideas, I was thinking of like all the adaptations and all the films that haven't been made from classic literature, like Stranger in a Strange Land, and I'm remembering a Forrest J. Ackerman lecture from 40 years ago where he was talking about all the classic literature that he thought could be adapted to film that never has even been attempted. So I just think of, there's maybe nothing new under the sun in a way, but its adaptations are infinite, you know.
Well, one of my favorite talking points is Independence Day, which is a wonderful, wonderful retelling of the old story. But man, did they retell it and just, I mean...
Are you saying it's the War of the Worlds or something other story?
No, basically, no, it's the old story. It's one day there was a peaceful land, then these evil demons came in and invaded it, and they were protected by magic.
Greek
and the evil-
mythology.
total mythology. I, mean,
I don't know
it's
how
just-
old you were going.
No, I was going real old.
Okay.
Well,
but they
Charles
did such a
bested us
brilliant-
with Plato, and before that, Gilgamesh, and
Right. I want to keep it on that plane.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess the consensus is that it won't run out of new ideas. It is certainly the R word. I can't say it. I promised I wouldn't. And I guess it's a whole other panel deciding, why something becomes a classic and is part of its classicness a new idea. And we seem to have suggested that if you can take something that is already pre-existed and add something new to it and give it a different spin that appeals to a wide audience, that may in fact be the new idea.
Certainly the patent office agrees with you there.
So that about ends this panel, and we now move into our pregnant pause.